So this video is all about cable and cartridge checks. So this is all about 75mm bindings in terms of cable routing, cartridges, and how things are all working. So the overall health of the cartridge and the cable is incredibly important. However, there's many different bindings that you're going to come across, and so you need to know how to check and assess and make sure stuff's working. So I've got a couple here, and we're going to do some close-ups as well, but I just kind of want to give you a general overview. This particular binding is a Black Diamond 03. It's got underfoot cable routing, which actually goes underneath the foot. Now, even though I'm going to show you how to check the cables and the cartridges moving freely, these don't get as damaged quite as often as some of the other ones that we're going to see, but I did want to show this as an example because you still do want to check the cartridges and the cables to make sure that the overall health is good before you send them out with the customer. Probably the most common one when we refer to cartridges and cables is the G3 Targa. There's also the G3 Targa Ascent, which is a touring model, and then the G3L, which is a women's model, which is essentially the same thing, just a different colorway. So this is definitely one that we're going to go over, how to check the cartridges, how to check the overall health of the cable, and then what kind of suggestions we can make to customers to make sure that they're keeping their stuff in good tip-top shape. Another one you're going to see is something like this that's similar to the G3 Targa. It's got the compression springs on the side. Cables are around the outside of the boot, but instead of a soft cable that we're going to check, this is a hard metal wire. So the Rotofella Cobra, the R4, the R8, you're also going to see a hard wire in the Volet Hardwire, Volet SX, Switchback. Pretty much all of the Volet bindings are going to use a hard wire of that sort. So we want to go through that, what to look for since it's not an actual cable, and then also how to check the cartridges and how that's similar to some of the G3 stuff. And then the last one I wanted to show you is sort of a binding that you're going to see quite more often because it's still being manufactured at the time of this video. It's the vise, or the axle has a similar configuration, both made by 22 Designs. So you'll notice that it's kind of a combination of that underfoot cable routing that we showed with the Black Diamond binding, but it does have this cable that runs on the outside. So we'll talk a little bit about how to inspect these cables to make sure that they're healthy and in good shape. And then, how to look at these compression springs to make sure there's no damage, which is not very often, if at all. But we definitely do want to check the overall health of the cable that goes underneath the foot and then around the back. So that's what we're going to go through in this video. Get a little more in depth with cartridges, how they work, what we need to be looking for, and also the overall health of the cable, what can be causing problems with it, and how we can fix it. So I've got two different G3 Targas here that I want to show you a couple things as you're checking it out. So we've obviously, these have been brought in for whatever reason, or maybe we're just doing a little bit of a basic check on them to make sure. Especially when you see cable bindings, it's always good to go the extra mile and check and see if everything's working. Okay, so the very first thing I want to look at is I want to check the health of the cable. And I call it the health of the cable because the well-being of it, so to speak, basically is something we always want to look for because these can and will break. And there's a couple things that we can look for and show customers to help avoid that. So the very first thing I'm going to do here is I always start looking at where the cable comes out of the binding and make sure that there's nothing going on. So you'll notice in this case, there's actually some cracking that's happening, okay? And so that's definitely something we want to let the customer know. We want to make sure that that's not fraying and that we're going to have more issues with this cut right here. So as that follows up, I'm going to follow it up here. Everything looks good. Now on the other side, I'm noticing similar stuff. I've got cracks here. in the cable. I've got some kind of scraped away plastic. I don't see any fraying, but there's some obvious issues. The other thing that I'm going to notice right here is on this part of a G3 target often gets sharpened, and that's what starts, it's from the ski kind of going across and making the metal burred and sharp where it's going to start cutting the cable. So that's something we really want to watch, and that's a lot of times where the break happens. On this particular one, the break was happening below, but either way, that cable's not in excellent shape. It's probably going to last the customer for a little bit of time, but it's definitely something you want to point out to them. So as I go to this other ski and kind of start doing a cable check, I'm doing the same thing. It's got a nice cable, a little bit of wear and tear, but overall it's in pretty good shape and I'm not seeing any issues. So the next thing I want to do is, after I check the cables and have kind of assessed that situation, is I want to go to the compression cartridges. So the first thing I want to do is make sure that these cartridges are moving freely. And how I'm going to do that is I'm going to turn them to the left, and it's going really nice and easy. To the right, nice and easy. I would call those free turning cartridges. I don't have any issues. Now, one of the things we want to do for maintenance is we do have sort of a multi-purpose marine grease that we can remove the cartridge, and there'll be a different SOP video for that where you can remove the cartridge, place a little bit of this marine grease onto the threading and then rethread it. And that's kind of how you keep it healthy and keep it from rusting and the cartridge from seizing up. So we've got some nice moving cartridges on this one. Let's pull this other ski over and we'll kind of look at what's going on here. So basically the first thing is I'm going to try and turn. You'll notice that the cartridges aren't turning how the other ones were freely. So that means that we've got an issue. It means that the cartridge is seized, and that means that water got in here at some point and started rusting against the threading and the spring. And so what's happening is when we're turning, you're actually seeing the cable move with the cartridge, and that's not what we want. We want the cartridge to move freely away from the cable and move back and forth. So we've now identified that we've got some issues with one of the cables and also some of the springs. So you'll want to refer to your SOP videos about how to do those repairs. So as I showed you before, there's a couple other types of cables and cartridges that you definitely need to be aware of. As far as looking at the free turning cartridge on a Rotofella R8, R4, or any of the cartridges for the volet bindings, which is not shown here but is very similar to this, exact same thing. You just want to go through and make sure that these are moving freely. Again, you can use marine grease as a good way to kind of touch things up, make sure that they're better. Also, as far as the hard wire, since you don't have a cable, is you want to make sure that these are just nicely flowing up and down. Somehow they haven't gotten bent or kicked or run over or something like that. Oftentimes you'll see very wavy metal here, and it's going to affect these being able to turn as well. So that's something to be aware of. So that kind of goes over the Rotofella R4, the R8, and the volet that have a hard wire with a compression cartridge there. As far as black diamond bindings go, you're going to see pretty similar stuff here. You're going to have the toe cage, and then you're going to have underfoot cable routing. This is for the Black Diamond 01, 02, and 03. This particular one is an 03, and you're going to notice these cartridges move nice and easy. Not a lot of problems. You're not going to see a lot of seizing in these. They seem to hold up fairly well over time, but you do want to check them and make sure that they're not seizing. And then, of course, you want to check the stirrup cables here and the cables up here. They're much more well protected than the G3 Targas that I showed you. And so you don't see as problems as often. But again, always make sure that you've got adjustability that's moving freely and that you don't have any cuts in the cables that are maybe going to cause someone to crash or get injured or have any issues on the hill. We want to make sure to keep the gear in good shape and in working order. And then the very last one I want to show you is the vise, which is very basically the underfoot cable routing is identical to the axle from 22 Designs. And the main thing we want to do here is just check and make sure that these coils are in good shape and that they're spinning, okay? And make sure that they're going back and forth and you're not having any issues there. Sometimes these coils can break and crack and do need to be replaced because you can't adjust them the way that you need to. So as always, anytime you've got a cable, make sure that there's no fraying going on the metal. Make sure there's no cuts in it, and make sure if it is a hardwire that it's not bending. And again, refer to your SOP videos for specific fixes on these so that you know how to repair them.